Hey there, fellow soil warriors. I have to share something incredible that happened in my garden recently, and honestly, I'm still pinching myself over the results. You know that patch of dead, lifeless dirt we've all encountered at some point, the kind that looks more like concrete than soil? Well, I took on one of those stubborn areas with nothing more than grass, mulch, and a handful of common ingredients, and what happened next completely blew my mind. Let me tell you, after years of battling difficult soils, I thought I knew what to expect. But this transformation happened so fast that I found myself checking the calendar, wondering if I'd somehow lost track of time. If you're dealing with compacted, nutrient-depleted soil that seems beyond hope, stick with me because what I'm about to share might just change your entire approach to soil restoration. Picture this. A section of my backyard that had been neglected for years. Previous homeowners had let heavy equipment compact it during construction, and then it sat unused, baking in the sun and getting pounded by rain. What remained was this gray, cement-like surface that water would literally run off of rather than penetrate. Sound familiar? I'm sure many of you have faced similar challenges. Maybe it's that problem area where nothing seems to grow, or perhaps you're starting fresh with builder's soil that's more sand and clay than anything resembling healthy earth. The conventional wisdom says it takes years to rebuild soil like this, but I'm here to tell you that's not always the case. When I first approached this dead zone with my shovel, I could barely penetrate the surface. The few weeds that had managed to establish themselves were stunted and yellowing. There was zero earthworm activity, no organic matter visible, and the soil had that telltale sour smell of anaerobic conditions. It was the kind of soil that makes even experienced gardeners want to throw in the towel. Here's where things get interesting, and I want you to pay close attention because the magic is in the combination. I started with grass mulch as my foundation, not just any grass clippings, but specifically clippings from healthy, chemical-free lawns. This became my primary carbon source and the protective blanket that would create the perfect environment for transformation. But grass mulch alone wasn't going to cut it. I added 3 key ingredients that supercharged the entire process. First, I incorporated aged chicken manure, which provided the nitrogen boost needed to balance out the carbon-heavy grass clippings. The ratio here is crucial. Too much nitrogen, and you'll create a slimy, anaerobic mess. Too little, and the decomposition crawls along at a snail's pace. The second ingredient was coarse compost, particularly compost that still had visible organic matter chunks in it. This wasn't the fine black gold compost you might think of, but rather material that was about 70% decomposed. This provided immediate slow-release nutrients while continuing to break down and improve soil structure. The third and perhaps most critical ingredient was mycorrhizal inoculant. I know it sounds fancy, but you can find this at most garden centers now. These beneficial fungi create partnerships with plant roots and dramatically accelerate nutrient cycling and soil aggregation. Think of them as the internet of the soil world, connecting everything and making the entire system more efficient. Now here's where most people go wrong. They just dump everything on top and hope for the best. The application method is absolutely critical for achieving rapid results. I started by barely scratching the surface of that compacted soil, just enough to create some texture without exhausting myself trying to dig into concrete. Then I applied the mycorrhizal inoculant directly to this scratched surface. This ensures the fungi make immediate contact with the existing soil rather than getting lost in the mulch layers above. Next came a thin layer of the aged chicken manure, maybe about ½ an inch, followed by the coarse compost in a similar thin layer. The grass mulch went on last, and this is where I probably applied it thicker than you might expect. I'm talking about a solid 4 to 6 inch layer of grass clippings. This might seem excessive, but remember, grass mulch compacts and decomposes quickly, especially when it's part of an active biological system. The final step was the most important. I soaked everything thoroughly but gently. I used a sprinkler rather than a hose to avoid washing away my carefully layered ingredients. The goal was to achieve consistent moisture throughout all the layers without creating soggy conditions. Week 1 was about what I expected. The grass mulch began settling and I could see the beginning stages of decomposition. But by week 2, something remarkable was happening. The previously impenetrable soil surface was showing signs of biological activity. Small insects were moving in and out of the mulch layer, and when I gently pulled back a section, I could see the soil underneath was already looking darker and more crumbly. By week 3, I was questioning my own timeline. Earthworms had not only moved in but were actively working throughout the area. The grass mulch was breaking down rapidly, creating this beautiful coffee ground-like texture mixed with the original materials. Most shocking of all, when I pushed my finger into the soil, it went down easily for the first time in years. Week 4 brought the moment that made me realize something special was happening. Volunteer plants, not weeds, but actual beneficial plants, were sprouting throughout the area. The soil had gone from gray and lifeless to dark brown and obviously teeming with activity. When I dug down about 6 inches, I found soil that looked and felt completely transformed. You might be wondering how this happened so fast when everything you've read says soil building takes years. The key is understanding that we weren't building soil from scratch. We were reactivating dormant biological systems that were already present, but suppressed. Compacted, seemingly dead soil often contains dormant microbiology that's just waiting for the right conditions to spring back to life. By providing optimal moisture, organic matter, and beneficial fungi all at once, we created an environment where these dormant systems could reactivate almost immediately. The grass mulch acted as both food and shelter for soil organisms while maintaining consistent moisture and temperature. The aged chicken manure provided readily available nutrients that could be immediately cycled through the system. The coarse compost introduced additional diverse microbiology while continuing to feed the system over time. Most importantly, the mycorrhizal fungi created instant connections between all these elements, essentially jump-starting the soil food web that takes much longer to establish naturally. Now, before you rush out to replicate this exactly, let me help you adapt this approach to your specific situation. If you're dealing with sandy soil rather than clay, you might want to add some coir or peat moss to help retain moisture. For extremely sandy conditions, I'd also recommend incorporating some fine compost along with the coarse material. If you're in a particularly dry climate, consider adding a layer of wood chips over the grass mulch to provide additional moisture retention. Just remember that wood chips are much higher in carbon, so you might need to bump up your nitrogen source slightly. For those of you dealing with contaminated soil or soil that's been treated with chemicals, give it a thorough watering and let it sit for a few weeks before applying this method. You want to make sure you're not feeding harmful residues into your biological system. If grass clippings aren't readily available in your area, shredded leaves can work similarly, though they'll break down more slowly. You might also consider a mix of both if you can get them. The beautiful thing about this transformation is that once you've jump-started the biological activity, maintaining it becomes much easier. I continue to add thin layers of organic matter every few months, sometimes grass clippings, sometimes shredded leaves, occasionally some kitchen scraps that I bury lightly under the mulch. The key is never letting the system go completely dry or completely bare. Soil biology needs consistent moisture and food sources to maintain the level of activity we've established. During particularly dry spells, I make sure to water the area deeply but infrequently, encouraging deep root growth and maintaining the fungal networks we've established. I've also found that this transformed soil responds incredibly well to cover cropping. A simple mix of crimson clover and winter rye sown in the fall keeps the biology active through the cold months and adds even more organic matter come spring. I hope this gives you the confidence to tackle that problem area in your own garden. Remember, soil transformation doesn't have to be a years-long project if you understand how to work with natural biological processes rather than against them. The combination of grass mulch, aged manure, coarse compost, and mycorrhizal inoculant created results in my garden that I honestly didn't think were possible in such a short time frame. But more than the speed of the transformation, I'm thrilled with the long-term health and vitality of this soil. If this approach resonates with you and you decide to try it in your own garden, I'd love to hear about your results. Make sure to subscribe to the Soil Sensei channel for more soil building adventures, and don't forget to share this with fellow gardeners who might be battling their own dead soil challenges. Together, we can transform more gardens and create healthier growing spaces for everyone. Happy gardening!